Hi everyone, this is Chris Sciano with Unicorn Riot. I'm here outside the Northumberland County Courthouse in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. We were here inside reporting for about 2 hours during a fairly extensive bail hearing for two women from Massachusetts, Celeste Legere and Cara Mitrano. Both are held in the county jail here and are accused of being behind the October 19th release of 683 mink from the Richard Stahl Sons fur farm just up the road from where we are here in Sunbury. The two are facing a battery of, I believe, 14 charges, including ecoterrorism, which is a Pennsylvania state offense that essentially says anyone that interferes with or obstructs economic activity involving plants or animals is a terrorist. They're both being held on a $150,000 bond. That's a total of $300,000. Mark Stahl, who is the owner and operator of the Stahl Sons mink farm, told local media that each mink cost about $50. So that's under $35,000, yet the two of them are being held on $300,000 bond total. Northumberland County District Attorney Mike O'Donnell made a big stink about the alleged quote-unquote anarchist communes, or he called them compounds, where the defendants are alleged to have lived. Character witnesses called by the defense were repeatedly pressed for the names of roommates, asked about the political ideology of their roommates, were asked if people they lived with had any sort of anti-law enforcement beliefs, that was in addition to the more rudimentary things of, oh, do you live with anyone who's on probation, or if someone had a warrant, etc. That's normal for a bail hearing. But the prosecution here went above and beyond to try to say that, oh, if you're associated with these anarchists or people that are against law enforcement, that somehow makes them more of a flight risk or more of a threat to the community in this case. Judge Paige Rosini said she would not make a decision today about the defense's request for a lower bail amount. Currently, they can't afford bail, so both Celeste Legere and Cara Mitrano are stuck here in jail. Celeste Legere, who's a transgender woman, has been held essentially in isolation or administrative segregation in quote-unquote protective custody. Over Zoom, Celeste testified today that she's constantly sexually harassed where she's being held in a men's unit and has been denied her hormone medication since she was arrested on October 19th. And so the defense is citing that, among other reasons, as why she should be released on a lower bail. These two are facing around 40 years in prison each for the alleged crime of releasing 683 mink from the Richard Stahl Sons mink farm. The affidavit filed against them, which the prosecution attempted to cite in court, but the judge sort of dismissed that, saying this is just a bail hearing, this isn't a trial. The affidavit cites not just that their vehicle was allegedly seen leaving the scene, but it cites the presence of anti-police stickers that were found in their car, literature about how to use more private browsers on the internet, use a VPN, use the Tor browser, things like that, as well as notes from attending a Know Your Rights seminar. So not only does the affidavit filed against Legere and Mitrano in this case contain criminal allegations against them, there's also this layer of involving political ideology, specifically anarchist ideology, and criticism of the police as somehow being tied to this criminal offense. We heard from about a dozen or so character witnesses during the bail hearing. Both Legere and Mitrano do a lot of work with the homeless, volunteering, working with women's shelters, things like that. So that was brought up, as well as how several of the character witnesses have offered to house and employ them in several different locations. They're looking to be allowed to return back to Massachusetts, but they also have places to stay here in Pennsylvania. The defense is asking that they be released without GPS monitoring. We'll see if the judge does reduce their bail, whether or not they're stuck wearing an ankle bracelet while they're fighting this case. So it seemed like DA O'Donnell was starting to get into the stickers and other literature of a First Amendment nature that's mentioned in the affidavits as probable cause for some of the charges in this case, which includes an ecoterrorism charge. Judge Paige Rosini said that she wouldn't be issuing a decision on the request for a reduction in bail today, but that she would be deciding in the next few days. Court's closed tomorrow, so we should have a decision on this week. One thing she said that stuck out, pushing back on the district attorney's request to keep bail at the present amount of $150,000 for each defendant. And this is a collection of quotes from in court. She said, this, meaning $150,000 for the two women charged with allegedly liberating these minks, is exponentially more than is set for people who hurt people. She also asked the DA, how is $150,000 a reasonable bail for someone who hasn't hurt people? She repeatedly said, this is a property crime, as well as who are they at risk of hurting? pointing to one of the key facts in this case, which is that no humans were harmed. Some mink, who are sentient creatures but are being looked on as property by the law here, were set free. Most of them were recovered. Despite the presence of a state ecoterrorism charge in this case, it does seem that the judge that is currently overseeing it is like, yeah, this is a property crime. Judge Rossini's comments about how this case essentially revolves around property crimes raises the question of just how significant or impactful it will be that the Pennsylvania State Police and the District Attorney's Office are using the Pennsylvania Ecoterrorism law passed in 2006. This law was heralded both by the animal industry, various agricultural industries, and then Governor Ed Rendell as a way to strike back against militant animal rights and environmental activists, but was also seen by civil liberties advocates as essentially criminalizing free speech or adding on extra penalties for crimes already on the books based on the perceived ideology of people committing certain acts. There's a bit of a conflict of interest that's not being reported in that Mark Stahl of the Stahl Sons fur farm that's at the center of this case is also the secretary of the Fur Commission USA, which is making sure that the local media repeats their claims that the defendants here are terrorists and are domestic extremists. Anti-fur activists say they feel emboldened by the fact that the fur industry is struggling. Between 2017 and 22, for instance, over half the fur farms in the United States closed. The price of mink fur also dropped by over 50% during that same time period. So despite the high risks of the increased repression of animal rights activists in the United States in the post-9/11 era, people still have a degree of optimism about confronting this industry. And I think that has a lot to do with how we've seen both the Fur Commission USA and through the role of law enforcement in responding to the victims in this case, according to the court, which is the Stahl Sons fur farm, which has been around since the 50s and kills thousands of minks a year. Minks are usually killed before they're 1 year old. They're kept their entire lives in cages not much bigger than the size of their body. Minks are semi-aquatic, generally solitary predators that usually can roam miles in a day. So these creatures are confined. They're not living the kind of life they would be living in the wild. They're not domesticated animals. Minks in fur farms are usually killed either by being gassed with carbon dioxide or by being beaten or electrocuted to death. So the defendants, Celeste, Legere, and Cara Mitrano, and their supporters are still awaiting Judge Paige Rosini's ruling on whether or not to decrease the bail amount in their case, which could mean the difference between their continued incarceration and their relative freedom while awaiting trial. From Sunbury, Pennsylvania, outside the Northumberland County Courthouse, this is Chris Sciano for Unicorn Riot. Thanks for watching.